All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming this afternoon to Risk Management and HR Decisions. Here in the next 30 minutes or so for an hour, you are going to have a whole lot of compliance and risk management fun. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce the W3 team. If I can have the team stand up, we have Brad, Mike, they are both advisors, JP, Connor, Mark, again, all of our advisors. Here in the back, we have Denise, who is our EB department manager, and the new addition to our team, Stephanie. She is a senior client executive. And my name is Katie Reynolds, and I am the employee benefits practice leader. Here today, we have Unum as our sponsor of the lunch. Jordan, would you like to say some things?
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to partner with you all and sponsor the lunch. Love working with this W3 team, great group of producers, great group of advisors. Quickly about Unum, if you've not heard of us, we are a large ancillary benefits carrier, widely been known as having the best disability contract in the market for the last 50 years. We've got some really exciting things going on with API connections, working with different HRIS systems. So if you guys are interested in talking about that, please connect with your W3 team and like to loop me in. But appreciate the opportunity to sponsor. Yeah.
But I hope you guys are ready for a live interactive workshop. And the reason we wanted to have it a workshop is we want involvement. So many times we come to these and we sit here for an hour, and an hour seems, no offense, sometimes like 2 or 3 hours. That's why we want action, interactive, hands-on workshop. After lunch, we'll have MJ, who is our guest speaker, who will be conducting the workshop. She's absolutely amazing. She's an HR consultant with her own company, 2 partners. And she recently moved to Denver.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. We are going to get started. I know everyone just got their food, and we've had some really nice discussions. So welcome, welcome. My name is MJ Whalen. I am an HR executive for many, many years. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it is more than 16 years I have been doing this. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you. I most recently worked for Hopkins, and during the pandemic, I was the VP of HR for HCA Healthcare, and I was with HCA for 5 years. And this month, we are celebrating 2 years of me being in business on my own, which I'm very excited about. So thank you. It was a happy accident. I was approached by a now client who needed some HR consulting, strategic planning. They needed a little bit of everything. And I started helping them out. And then they referred me out. And as you know, in HR, we go to a lot of networking events. So attended some of those, landed some more clients, and now here we are 2 years later. So very excited to be here with all of you, very excited to partner with W3, because I can tell you, as a military spouse that moved a lot and dealt with a lot of different insurance companies and worked with a lot of different companies over the years, my experiences in the insurance space, sitting at that utilization table and doing the utilization review was not always fantastic. Right? Anyone else? Okay, maybe just me. And working with W3 is such a breath of fresh air. All of the people on their team are honest and just fun and easy to talk to, and you can learn so much from them. So it's just a joy to partner with an organization that I feel strongly about in this space that can be really helpful to all of you as HR leaders making those decisions at the table. So big round of applause for W3. Love them. And super happy to have Unum today giving us the sponsorship. So big round of applause for them. And today we are going to talk about risk. And we are going to talk about risk in HR. We're going to talk about a few legal updates, a few topics. And before we get into the worksheet, because I know you're eating and enjoying the great food, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of how this session is structured. So for those of you that are here today that are SHRM certified and you're receiving your PDCs, your continuing education credits from SHRM, On the front slide, you have your activity number that you can pop in. And I believe that your W-3 person that invited you here will be sending this off to you. So you'll get a copy of this. So this is not my IP, my intellectual property. I'm here to share it with all of you so that you can continue to grow and learn your own HR leadership journey. So you'll have this PowerPoint and you'll have that activity code that you can submit. So in terms of what we're going to do here today, when it comes to the federal updates that we're talking about, we're predominantly talking about what's happened since January of 2025. So those are kind of the executive orders that we're going to touch on today, some of the legal frameworks that have been impacted and what you kind of need to have on your radar, and then some actionable steps that you can take when you leave here, have that worksheet in hand and bring it back to the rest of your HR team or the rest of your leadership team and go, okay, what do we need to look at in our handbook? What do we need to review in our policies? And where might we have some of this risk that we can address? So in terms of kind of where we start and where we're going with this, in January of 2025, a lot of executive orders came out on the docket. And to give everyone a baseline of who the EEOC is and the kinds of decisions that they make, there are two sides of this coin, right? So in the HR world, we talk about the NLRB, right, the National Labor Review Board, and we talk about the EEOC. We talk about the group that is making determinations when it comes to discrimination. And some big changes happen in 2025 when it comes to the information that we received about what is considered appropriate or inappropriate to have in our training and what's considered appropriate or inappropriate to have in our handbooks. So a couple of watch points, if you're taking notes, if you are an organization that receives federal funding, for example. So I have a lot of clients, like I work with FEMA, I work with the Department of Homeland Security, I have contracts with the Army, I have the contracts with the Navy, and when I do training with them, they send me, before I even start the training, a list of no-go phrases, no-go words, things that I have to audit my training curriculum for. So that's something to jot down in your notes if you're an organization that receives any kind of state or federal funding. So that's the first thing there. Then when we're talking about disparate impact, right? In the world of HR, we talk about disparate treatment and we talk about disparate impact. So disparate treatment is when we do something intentional that is discriminatory or going to change an outcome, right? If we're hiring a certain way, if we're looking for a certain age demographic, if we're looking for a certain race or gender, et cetera, that can be considered an intentional aspect. Unintentional disparate impact is when we have a policy or we have a procedure that has this outcome and that wasn't the intent of the policy, right? So most of us, when we violate in this area or we have an issue in this area, it's unintentional and it falls into the category of disparate impact. There's an impact on the team that is seen as discriminatory, but nobody set out to make a policy that says, okay, we're only hiring people that look this way or come from this background. Does that make sense? Okay, and then the third one, when it comes to your reporting, I cannot tell you, oh my goodness, how many of my clients, we've done an audit of their basic practices. What's in your employee file? What's in your HRIS system? Or if you're using pen and paper, what's in your filing cabinet, right? Let's go digging in there. Are you doing the I-9s? And I talk to those clients and they're not doing some of those fundamental things, or they're doing them, but they're doing them inconsistently, right? I've worked in organizations like that where we had a process on paper that said, this is what we keep in the employee file. This is how we maintain employee files. These are the things that we report to the government. These are the posters that we hang, et cetera, et cetera. But for whatever reason, we got busy, right? It was open enrollment. We had other things that we were doing, and we stepped away from being consistent with those practices, and then we had those unintentional consequences of being out of compliance. So that's another thing to keep track of, right? The word that you want to write down in your notes there is consistency. Just because you have the policy doesn't mean that everybody is following it on your team. I'll say that again. Just because you have the policy or the SOP doesn't mean everyone is following it on your team. We're having church. So that's really important, the consistency in that space. And then the last one up here, when it comes to kind of your accommodations, one of the things that we've seen a big uptick in is religious accommodation. So we all know that during the pandemic, there was a requirement by some organizations in some industries, like healthcare, for people to receive vaccines. And then we had this huge uptick of religious accommodation requests. Well, because of that huge uptick that happened during the pandemic, those religious accommodation requests have continued, and the EEOC has been unpredictable in how they have ruled on some of those cases. So in some cases, they've been very conservative with their rulings, and in some cases, they've been more traditional in their rulings. So it's very important for us to keep an eye on those things. And for all of us, when we think about our own training, when we think about our own professional development, one of the things that really sticks with me is back in 2013, I attended a training, right? Very much like this, where we were sitting down in a conference room. It was very cold. We were eating a lunch, and the trainer said, you know, as HR professionals, we have to take every week a period of time that we dedicate to our own reading and our own education of what's going on in the HR space. And she said that way back in 2013, okay? In 2025 and 2026, you know what I can tell you? It has been the most dynamic time in human resources. Raise your hand if you are an organization that has employees in multiple states. Okay, so listen up. If you have employees in multiple states, then it's not just what Florida says, right? It's Florida plus, whatever states you have your employees in. So every state since January of 2025 has also put through things on the docket in their own legislative capacity to do one of two things: to either align with the executive orders more, or to do the exact opposite, right? You were just telling me about Washington State, right? And how Washington State, I don't have clients in Washington State, but you were sharing, do you want to share with the group how they protect the employees? No, it was a really good story, please.
So we work with people, with employees in the state of Washington, and we're talking about background checks. Background checks are a little bit different in the state of Washington. They more lean towards the employees. So it's almost like it's only like a 3-year window that if an employee did something incorrect, then it won't show up in the background check. So you have to really do a little bit more homework, especially if you're dealing with people's homes or in retail, people coming into your stores. So. But yeah, it's like a 3-year window. Things start disappearing off that background check. So,
3 years.
Normally it's 7, but yeah, they're more
Yeah.
for the employees, and they want the employees out working, just like with their workers' comp. They have state-run workers' comp.
Yep.
So they run everything in the workers' comp world. So everything is about the employee versus the employer itself.
So Thelma brings up a really good point. If you have employees in states where those states align more with employee rights versus employer rights, you have to know that. You have to understand that impact on your employee population, but most importantly, on your handbook, and be able to mitigate that risk. So it's really important for us to stay involved and aware of where our employees work and live and how those state rules and regulations and upcoming rules and regulations, how they're being implemented, because it can dramatically affect something like hiring. Like a 3-year window, that I've never heard of such a short window. So that is a really great example. Thank you for sharing that. Give her a big round of applause. I put her on the spot. I put Thelma on the spot, but it's important to really understand that. There are states that are more employee focused, and then there are states that are more employer focused. And that changes the dynamic of how we deal with our employees dramatically. So before I get too far into all of my stories and all of the things that we're gonna dive into, I have a little assessment. So on your workbook, or in your worksheet, excuse me, I want you to go to the first page and make sure, because we're all filling out the same worksheet, that you write your name at the top, write today's date at the top so that you have that. And I just want you to take this really quick assessment And when you've finished taking the assessment, I want you to put your pen down. And what you are doing is you are indicating whether your department is prepared in this area, whether you have a gap in this area, or this is a very legitimate answer. Maybe you don't know. Maybe it's an area of the HR department that you don't specialize in. Maybe you're more of the benefits person and somebody else handles some of the legal updates and some of the other things, so that's okay too. But regardless, go through this quick checklist. When you've completed it, please put your pens down, and then I know that you are finished. And you have to be honest.
Tools and hiring.
I have a really good book recommendation about that.
Really?
Yeah, we can talk.
I was at a conference and they were discussing it picks up on trends that
Yes.
you hire and then develops biases within the system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And if you're looking at number 3 and you're not sure about those acronyms, it's paid family medical leave and family medical leave. Those are what the acronyms stand for there. Yeah.
So Massachusetts is like the first one to lead
It's
the charge.
so hard to manage those programs. So hard.
And it's only not on reports at the federal level, and just one of the things for employers.
I think it's going to take a long time
Yeah.
to get approved at the federal level.
Especially the way that everything's shaped up right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you have small mom and pop businesses that won't be able to afford
Yeah.
employing anyone.
Yeah. I wonder if they could implement like a threshold,
That would be smart.
which means they won't do it.
I know. Okay, so when you're reading through this list and you see your areas, what I want you to make a note of here is your 2 lowest areas. It's really important when you come to a professional development, when you come to any kind of training, it's really easy to come in the door and hear the information and passively consume the information and go right back out the door and do everything exactly the way you were doing before. But that would make this time a waste for all of you. So what we really want to impress upon everyone is your action items. So these areas where maybe you've marked that you're not sure, or maybe areas where you've marked yourself a little bit lower than you would like, if your consistency is not there, there's that word again, then maybe those are the things you list out as your 2 lowest areas. And we're going to talk about some action plans, right? So first and foremost, I want to talk about some of the unintentional consequences that can come from having a, sometimes they're called employee resource groups, sometimes they're called, trying to think, what are some of the other names for ERGs? There's so many big organizations have different names for them. What have you guys called them in the past, other than employee resource groups? Anyone? What's that? Associate resource groups. Okay, okay. But everybody is familiar with what we're talking about when we say employee resource groups, right? Does anybody have questions about it? Need us to explain like the fundamentals of an ERG?
High level.
High level, okay. So ERGs at a fundamental level were developed by large organizations to put groups of people together and give them additional opportunities, right? So maybe, well, I'll give you an example. Raymond James, right? A place where my husband works. So they had like a big group that did women's initiatives, and then they had a big group that would get together and do the MLK parade, and then they had a big group that would get together and do the Pride parade, et cetera, right? So those were the employee resource groups there. I have worked in organizations where the idea of the ERG and the idea of putting together the ERG to benefit the employees created more rifts, created more issues about the funding. Who was going to get the funding to do what? And then how were we going to distribute that fairly and effectively, and then maximize those benefits for the employees. So there's a lot of differing opinions when it comes to whether or not an ERG can be successful and really engage the employees the way it had intended to be used. ERGs in organizations are probably the #1 area where you've seen the biggest pull back from a lot of bigger organizations because of the executive orders of 2025. So you see it in ERGs, and you see it in the formation or dissolution of an ERG, and then you see it in the handbook, the training, the onboarding, and then the information that people are trained on throughout the year, right? So maybe you've worked in organizations that in the past had training about bias, or maybe you've worked for organizations in the past that had training on how to hire effectively, and they would talk about some of those biases. A lot of organizations moving away from that because of the executive order. Does that make sense? So if you work for an organization that receives funding federally or from the state level, that's one of the areas that you have to audit. Does that make sense? Questions about that one? So that's your action item if #1 is an area that you marked yourself as lower in or that you're not really sure. That's kind of the threshold of how you have to look at it. Your policies, your annual training, and how and if you're still implementing ERGs for your employees. Okay? All right, let's talk about the second one. Wage and hour. So I just had, I think I talked about this in my interview with JP. I just had a client who had 4 employees, okay? They all sat at the front desk. They all were called, I don't know, like admin assistant. And all 4 of them did the same job. One of them was treated as salary, and the rest of them were paid hourly. Because my client just thought, well, we really like, we'll call her Barbara. We really like Barbara. She's worked here the longest. We're just gonna make her exempt because we like her so much. Guess how much money this client owed her in back pay? And guess what their faces looked like when I told them that number and we calculated it together because she's worked there for decades. That's a big problem, guys, right? But they didn't mean to. Now, here I'll tell you another version of that story. How many of you have worked in organizations where you're putting that information, exempt, non-exempt, into an HRIS system, and the HRIS system gets it wrong, or there's a manual, a little fat fingering, right? When you're putting that into the HRIS system, and you inadvertently mark someone of one exempt or non-exempt when they should have been the other. How many of you have experienced that? And then your payroll department flags it, hopefully, and someone can catch it on time. So what is your process right now to internally audit that you have your exempt people being paid exempt and your non-exempt people being paid non-exempt? What is your internal audit process? Depending on the size of your organization, how many employees you have, you may be using a very complex HRIS system that does a lot of this for you. But if you're smaller and you have less employees, guess who has to audit it manually? You do. Write it down. I will audit my exempt and non-exempt status. It's really important. Has anyone had that experience where you go in and you're looking through and then you realize that somebody has been paid incorrectly? Anyone? Nobody's admitting to it. Okay, well, it's a very scary feeling when you see that someone has been paid incorrectly, because the outcome is that someone that is being paid in an exempt fashion when they should be treated as hourly, now you owe them all of that overtime, right? You have to do a very creative calculation to make it right. So that's our wage and hour. So if you have a system that you haven't audited in a while, we're writing on our to-do list, we're going to do an internal audit of that system. Or if you're on your professional development journey and you want to learn more about the HRIS software that you purchase, that your organization pays for, understand, what is the internal audit process from that platform that we're using. Is it ADP? Is it, I don't know, what are some of the platforms that you guys are using other than ADP? It's like the big one. Paycom, Paylocity, Oasis, Paychecks, all of those. So we want to go in, we want to understand, and we want to have it on our radar. Something that we're doing at least on an annual basis, and that there's some sort of check and balance once someone is onboarded, that the paycheck looks correct. Okay, let's talk a little bit about leave. We have all of you that raised your hands, okay, with the employees in multiple states. When you have these employees that work in multiple states, we have situations where people are working in states where there are state level leave programs, okay? Places like New York, places like New Jersey, Washington State, Colorado. So what does that mean? It means that not only do you have to understand the legal framework of FMLA, but you also have to understand the state program, right? So what are some of the things that cause us challenges on the state program side? What are some of the challenges? Yes. Yes. Can you run them concurrently? How do you pay someone appropriately? What other things come up? Yeah. Say that again. Give us more context, or like give the group an example, because not everybody does this every day. So
before where I was here, I was in higher ed. So
okay.
in Colorado, they will cover students.
Okay.
Where in Florida, we don't have to cover students.
Yes.
Where they're not like if they're on a fellowship or something like that.
Very good. Did everyone hear that? Before working in Florida, she was working in Colorado.
Not Colorado, but I was in higher ed. So we
Oh.
hired people in Colorado.
You hired people in Colorado. Okay. So those employees that were in Colorado, they were covering at the state level their payments, right? For the students, but not for...
They're doing for employees, but you have to cover students
Okay.
also. Like
Okay.
internships.
Ah, gotcha.
You don't have to cover internships in Florida.
Gotcha.
There's different rules on volunteers.
Yes, the volunteers is very tricky. That's my, the table with all of our nonprofits over there. Yes, very tricky with the volunteers, absolutely.
Even with states, it's different across what sector you're in.
Yes.
Nonprofit, public, or private, who you have to cover. So you have to remember that, and then what state you're in.
Yes, and to add to that, right, so we have, I'm just gonna put this down for a second. We have our federal legal framework, right? Then you have your state framework, and within the state framework, to Catherine's point, depending on the sector you're in, those rules change. And I'm gonna add another one to it. In states like New York and California, it depends on the municipality. There's changes within that. What you do in New York City is not the same as what you do in upstate. What you do in Santa Monica, California is not the same as what you do in Los Angeles. So there's a lot of variability there, and where your employee lives and where your employee works and does the business on the day-to-day depends on which rules are applicable. Very good, Catherine. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you for that. Excellent. Okay, so we are going to talk a whole bunch at the end about AI, because there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm going to skip that one for now, but I know I'm just keeping you on your toes. We have a lot to talk about with regard to AI, so we're going to circle back to the AI. Let's look at your handbook for a second on number 5. Here's my rule of thumb. Because 2025 and 2026 are so dynamic, if your handbook has not been reviewed and audited in the past 24 months, put it on your list. Put it on your list. And there are so many different great ways to address the concerns that you may have in your handbook. You can partner with groups like us, right? You can partner with the organization that processes your payroll. You can partner with the organization that provides your HRIS services. You have lots of different options. Those of you that are involved in SHRM, right? They're always doing the updates, the legal information. You can do that with them. But you have to do something, right? If you have an HR handbook, if you have an employee handbook that has not been updated, I promise you, there is something in there I will find that it needs to be addressed. And some of the things are huge, right? We have all of these different executive orders that came out in 2025, 2026, and they directly impact the way that we work in that legal framework at the federal level. And because of that, at the federal level, we have the states that then respond, right? So we have to understand which state do we operate in, which way is our state going, and what are my watch points in my industry. So if that is one of the things that you marked yourself a little lower on, that's a big to-do item. And my advice to you is break it up into chunks, right? Let's do the leave an hour thing, let's do the internal audit thing, let's do the file review. Break it up for yourself, because if you just put on your list, I've been an HR executive for a long time, if you put on your list, update the handbook, that sounds like a very big task, right? That's a heavy lift. So break it up for yourself, get your team involved, and use the resources that you have. Whoever you already contract with that's providing services to your organization, that's what they're there to help you with, right? If it's W3, if it's me, if it's your HRIS, whoever it is, they can help you and they can get those pieces of your handbook updated. Okay, I-9 posting and compliance. Who's done a walkthrough of their facility lately and checked all the posters? Who's done that? Who's used to doing that? Everybody should be raising their hands. You're halfway through the facilities? Okay, okay. So you do it over the course of the whole year? What's your strategy? You go to certain places at certain times, or how do you do it?
Whenever we can get out of the office.
Whenever you can get out of the office.
It's not an easy thing. I can look at it and I go, oh, we're kind of caught up today. Let's get the heck out of here and go to one of the stores.
Right.
Because we have 11 locations.
Yeah.
A huge distribution center, so we have a lot of ground to cover.
Absolutely. And here's a trick, okay? This is how I used to do it. I used to tell the leaders that are, because when I was at Hopkins, we had 70 outpatient points of care, and I couldn't make it to all 70. So I would have someone at the facility take a picture and text it to me, because we couldn't make it out to all 70, right? But we have an obligation in human resources to have the right posters, to have the right postings, not just the federal, but also the state. Okay, so those two things are very important. So if you haven't been out and about, know that you can also phone a friend at one of your facilities. If you're responsible for many locations, they can take a picture of it, and then you can get that off your list, right? Those are what we call in the HR world, that's some low-hanging fruit. That's an easy thing that we can put on our list and get it done. Does that sound good? Okay, I see a lot of you shaking your heads, so this is a good thing. Okay, I think that's everything here. We're gonna circle back to the I-9 stuff. So when we talk about EEOC in general and risk and all the things, I kept this slide in here because these three things, if you marked yourself a little bit lower on these are the ones that I want you to look at your list, look at your notes right now, and put a big star next to. Because these are the ones where if you are out of compliance, there are going to be more significant consequences. Does that make sense? So double check your list. If these are areas where you have some opportunity, then put a star next to these. These are your areas of high risk. And what I tell all of my HR practitioners is that our number one job is to advocate for our employees. Our number two job is to mitigate risk for our organization, right? That's how we stand up for our employees. That's how we create high retention. That's how we create value and trusting relationships with our employees, is by staying in compliance and being organizations of strong integrity, right? So it starts with the fundamentals, and it starts with this administrative stuff that we have to do in the HR space. Okay, so we have, if you want to flip your page over, we have some scenarios that we're going to read through, and then we're going to talk through on the scenarios. What's the risk, and what would we do? So we're gonna go through these one by one. I would love to have somebody with a fabulous reading voice read the first one for us. Do you wanna take that? Do you wanna be our first reader?
For scenario one.
Scenario one, read it for us, Brad.
Marcus has been struggling with performance for months. His manager documents 3 formal warnings over 6 months. 2 weeks after, Marcus submits an FMLA request for a medical procedure. His manager terminates him. citing the documented performance issues.
Okay. So I'll give you a moment to respond, and then we're going to talk through it. So what do you think? No risk? Possible risk? How risky is this? High risk. Okay, who said high risk? Okay, Latia. Okay, Latia, why is this a high risk situation? Let's give our attention to Latia for a second. Go for it.
I say a high risk because they could, if he hired seek counsel, they can say that they retaliated against him by going out on the promoter.
Very good. Very good. Give her a round of applause. Excellent. Excellent. What else would we add to this? What else would we add to this? Who's dealt with this? Go ahead.
Well, I would say if you do this, then it needs to be that you're consistent across the board, because that's the problem. If this one person,
Yep.
you did everything documented correctly, but then you've never done it to anybody else, then there's a problem. And also it needs to be well documented.
Yes. Yes, yes. So let's put that in our notes. We can do this. We can do this if it's well documented. We can do this if this is how we always do it. It has to be done consistently, right? We can't just, oh, well, today Susie did this. We're going to terminate her right away. Oh, today Bob did this, but we really like Bob, so we're going to make an exception for Bob. No, no. If what you do to Susie, you do to Bob, and vice versa, right? Did you have something to add?
Yeah, what was the additional reasoning for why 2 weeks later? So that for me was like the kicker. Like you didn't have a reason to terminate them prior to the FMLA, but you terminated after.
Yes.
Without an additional situation.
Yes, yes. Very good. That's Laura?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Laura is 100% correct there. We have to look at the entirety of the situation and the timing of it. So when you are making your notes, when you are going through this type of scenario, having that timeline and making sure it is locked in. It can't be, oh, well, we were just sick of them. We were just tired of it. No, that is not a good enough reason, and we have to be more thoughtful, and we have to be beholden to our policies. Very, very good. Excellent job, guys. Give yourselves a big round of applause. Great effort on that one. Okay. Who would like to be the reader for number 2? Mike, you want to take it?
Yes, I do.
Go for it. Mike's got a nice voice. Go for it, Mike.
Your company uses an AI-powered resume screening tool that has reduced time to hire by 40%. You've never run a bias audit on it. A rejected candidate who is a member of a protected class files an EEOC charge claiming the screening process was discriminatory.
Ooh, this one is spicy. Okay. So, question number 1 is, do you know if you are utilizing a platform in your talent acquisition space, if your talent acquisition platform is embedded with AI? And if you don't know the answer to that question, that's the first note I want you to write down. Go and figure out if you're posting things in a place, right? If you're posting things on like a community website, that's not an issue. But if you're paying for some kind of an enhancement from LinkedIn, from ZipRecruiter, from, I don't know, what was it? Indeed. Yeah, any of these places now, when we're buying our posts, what does it say next to it? Oh, you can buy it for this price, and then for this price, it's AI enhanced. Well, what does that mean? What kind of results am I going to receive through this AI enhancement? What are they screening out? And is someone manually going through those candidates that have been screened out to determine that they do not meet the threshold to be considered a viable candidate? And if there's no process for that, guess what? Huge risk, right? So that's the first question we have to ask ourselves. What other kind of situations have you been in similarly situated to this, where you've had those talent acquisition folders, right? And you click on it and you open it and you look at the results that it's given you, and you've found, some of the people in here don't meet the threshold, or some of the people in here kind of meet the threshold, what's going on behind that? How many of you have opened your folder of candidates that you've received through some sort of AI enhancement, and it's not aligned with the parameters that you put in? How many of you received those kinds of candidates in your folder? Anyone? Yeah? Tell us about it, Lisa.
An advertising for a very specific position,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll get individuals that apply with a completely different skill set,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're still put on the approved list.
Still put on the approved list. So what's happening there, right? When we see that, that's an indication to us that somewhere in the parameters, something is awry. How many of you use knockout questions as part of your process when you set up those postings? That's another place where there can be risk, right? If we have a knockout question, here's a really good one. If we have a knockout question that says, do you have a bachelor's degree, okay? But guess what? The job posting doesn't say that you need a bachelor's degree for that job. You can't have that question on there. It has to be tied to the job. So now you've created a situation where this AI enhanced platform is only going to pull, well, hopefully, right, Lisa? Only going to pull people with the bachelor's degree, but in reality, you could have put into that candidate pool a lot more people. And so that is a discriminatory practice, right? That can be a problem for us. That's a big risk. So this one's a huge deal. There is a lot happening in this space. And we're going to talk more about AI, but I hope that for all of you in your notes, when it comes to AI right now, the first thing that we need to understand in the HR space is which platforms are we using, especially when it comes to hiring, and what kind of AI enhancement do they have? Like, what is that AI enhancement doing on the back end? And do we have a process to really look through the candidates that have been declined or rejected to ensure that they should not have been included? Does that make sense? Okay, I'll give you guys a second to write that one down, and then we'll find another reader for the next one. Do you want to be our scenario 3?
He does.
All right, go for it.
The DEI program question. Are you going to do it?
Yeah, go for it. Go. I think they want to hear it louder.
Your
For the people in the back.
Your company has a mentorship program designed to increase representation of women and people of color in leadership. Since EO 14173, your legal team is unsure if it creates Title 7 exposure. HR wants to keep it, leadership wants to shut it down.
Okay. So, what are we going to do in this scenario? What would we do and why? Who has a good answer? Is this risky? Is this not risky? You're going to keep the program? We're going to let the program go? What would we do? What do we think back here in this table? Any thoughts?
Legal review.
Legal review. Okay, tell me more. How would you handle it, Mike?
DEI, would be the foremost question to ask your legal team.
Okay.
So that would definitely lean into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Working with legal. Yes, sir.
I would just say, if you're going to have it,
Yes.
I think to the program, open it up to everyone.
Yes, that is the answer. That's how you can keep it in, right? You have to make sure that it's fair, equitable, open to everyone. Absolutely. That is 100% the right answer. What else would we do? Who else has been in this situation, done something beyond opening the doors and kind of making it more accessible or getting legal involved? What else? Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I think it's very nuanced. I don't, when everything started coming out a few years ago, it was everybody shutting things down. So where it was before, they shut down entire departments. So it's like, now you're affecting other legal compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Title 7 and Title 9. You can't just put the kibosh on it. Like, so it's very nuanced. So I'd also answer the get legal review because you can't just simplify.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you're bringing to light that's really important is if you make a decision to change a program or if you make a decision to riff a program, then you have to do an analysis on that RIF the way you would for any other RIF, right? In an organization of any size, we don't just go, oh, we don't need this anymore, right? When we do that, we create other compliance issues for ourselves in human resources because we're not beholden to one set of compliance issues. We're not beholden to just the executive orders. Title VII still exists. And because of Title VII, we still have to follow Title VII. So we need to be aware and also take the time to be thoughtful. Very good. Yes. Yes. Yes, 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 100%. And a lot of that has to do with funding, right? Any organization that is tied to those funding sources wants to ensure that they don't lose the funding so that they can continue paying people. So it's for good reason, but to your point, it's very reactive and can create those issues for us. Very good. All right, last but not least, would you like to take number 4 for us?
Sure, I'm on paper, so let's go with the screen.
Ah, okay.
Your company has worked with the same marketing consultant for 3 years. She works exclusively for you, follows your brand guidelines, uses your tools and email, and works set hours you establish. She's always been paid on 1099 with the DOL reverting to the 2008 economic reality test. The payroll team flags her arrangement as potentially misclassified. Is she an employee or a contractor? What's your risk?
Okay. How many of you know what the skills and duties test is? Okay. We know that in 2025, skills and duties test reverted back to a different version. So if you didn't know that, here's your education, right? We have to be aware of which version of the skills and duties test we're using. And if the person that you are considering your 1099 employee is working the hours that you set as the organization, that in and of itself is your first red flag, right? So how would we handle this? What would we do if we found this on our books? Yeah, go for it.
I think we just balance it with the 6-factor test in determining the independent contractor and employee and walking through all those line items. And then just making notes of that, like where the company is controlling her hours, that's part of the test, the financial aspect of she only works for them, so she's clearly just not passing it. So I would just document that.
Yes. You said the key word. Document, document, document. If you run somebody through the skills and duties test, you have to have some sort of documentation that you've done it. Because we all know that when we have 1099 people that work with us exclusively, they tend to kind of be a part of the team, right? They tend to kind of hang out in meetings and come to things when we are having the things. And so the lines can be very easily blurred. So if you have a 1099 person that works exclusively, that's the word to put in your notes, that's when you really want to watch out, because it's different when you have someone that's contracting and they have multiple clients and multiple entities that they support. Then you can kind of get away with some justification. But to your point, when you run them through that test, if you don't have documentation that you ran them through that test, now what are you going to show for the internal audit, right? You have nothing to demonstrate. So that's the key part of that conversation. Very good. Excellent job, Sammy. Anyone else, would you do anything differently, or do you see any other things here to note when it comes to how we balance?
And she has a company email.
Ah, that's a very good point, Lisa. Yes, that can be very problematic. Once you start giving them the same things that you would give an employee, now you are effectively treating them as an employee, right? So we have to balance that. Very good, very good. Okay, last but not least, today we are going to talk about AI in HR. And I don't know if this looks like something to anyone, if this looks a little bit like the Matrix, that's intentional, because that's kind of what we're in right now, right? A lot of us are using platforms at work that are, woo, AI enhanced, but we don't know what it's doing, right? How many of you use a platform for performance management? How many of you use a performance management platform where you do check-ins annually or reviews, right? How many of you know if your performance management platform is AI enhanced? Do you know if it is or not? If you don't know, write it down on your list. That's one of the ones to check, because there have been findings with some of these performance management tools that have been following through on biases that we've created, right? We are the input for the data. So when you have garbage in, you have garbage out. It's a data issue. So we can't rely on the decisions that it makes from a performance management system. Now, we talked about recruitment. There are a lot of really great books that are out there right now that I'm actively reading in this space that talk about the poor decisions that have been made in hiring by AI-enhanced platforms, unbeknownst to the employer, right? So how many of you have heard of Workday? Okay, Workday was just in a big case that went to the level of the EEOC for exactly this. How many of you are familiar with the Workday case that I'm about to talk about? It's huge, right? So Workday is one of the biggest HRIS systems out there, and Workday had some of these biases embedded in it, right? Some of them are embarrassing, things like, oh, a specific name is what we're looking for, or someone that's played lacrosse, or, oh, we're only gonna hire people who have the word baseball on their resume, and we're going to decrease the number of points or weight that someone has for having the word softball on their resume. Well, who plays softball and who plays baseball? What kind of a bias are we creating there? So these stories go on and on and on, and it is rampant in the recruitment world. That's why it's so important for us to understand the risk of what we're buying and what we're utilizing when we click on those posts. So the recruitment piece is like, we could talk about this one for hours. But I also want to bring to your attention benefits administration. Okay, benefits administration is another space where we have AI enhancement. And I'm going to call up Katie for a second because she's going to share with you a piece of the AI world that I didn't even know about until Katie shared it with me. And then we're going to have the opportunity to ask her some questions.
So we were talking to MJ about this, and specifically to benefits, and what we came up with in terms of every day
that we don't even think about, and you may not even know this. When we think about our carriers, right? Whether it's Florida Blue, Cigna, Aetna, or we're with a TPA, right? So maybe it's UMR. Did you know that depending on the carrier and the TPA that you're with for your medical claims, behind the scenes, there's something called auto adjudication. And what does this mean? Just means the claim is paid up to a certain threshold, right? So some carriers, some TPAs are at 5,000, but the standard 25,000. So you think of the claims that are running through these carriers and TPAs every day at 25 grand and below. Just there's no human eye. It's auto adjudicated. It's AI. No one's double checking. Is there any errors? Is it a duplicate? The list goes on and on. So that's just a quick example from a benefits perspective of AI going on behind the scenes in your medical plans. Was it, anybody ever heard of that? I saw some head shakes over here, but anybody ever heard of that before? Yeah, so it was just something that we wanted to make you aware of, that it is going on behind the scenes. And especially if you're self-funded and your TPA, what does that contract say, right? Because there are TPAs that do auto adjudication, but only at 5,000 versus 25,000 or 30,000. So if you're self-funded, make sure you're checking your contracts.
Very good. Does anybody have questions about that? I wanted to bring her up because that's very specific to the benefits world, and that's money out of your pockets, right? As the employer, that's just getting paid out automatically. That was something I was completely unaware of as an HR professional, that was happening on the back end. Yeah?
They also, there's some carriers for health insurance that will auto accept or deny, not just based on a threshold, but based on just AI reviewing. And because it's not always correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So the big takeaway here from this slide and from chatting with Katie is that every single aspect of human resources right now, as we speak, is being enhanced. Every single person that you, or every single platform, where you put information, whether it's your benefits platform, whether it's your payroll platform, whether it's your retention software, where you have that dashboard that shows you all the things, all of those platforms are being enhanced with AI. And I'm not here telling you that AI is a bad thing. It's a great thing for many different aspects. But You are the human in human resources, and you are here to mitigate risk for your organization and to stand up for your employees. So the best way for us to do that is for us to really step into 2026 and understand the platforms we're using, understand what our organizations are paying for, and what that's going to do to affect our employees and to potentially create risk for our employers. So when you are looking at all of these different softwares, don't automatically assume that because something says, oh, this is AI enhanced, that that's going to be helpful to your organization. It's only helpful if you understand how it works and if it meets the parameters of the compliance and regulatory framework that your organization operates in. Does that make sense? Okay, so I think we are right at time, right? And I want to give you all the opportunity to ask questions. For me, for Katie, we have a checklist at the end of this PowerPoint for you. I hope you have all taken lots of notes, but we just want to open it up. And this is information of how you will claim your PDC if you need it. So when we email this out to you, you can claim your PDC for continuing education credits. But what questions do we have? What things sparked some new thoughts, some things on your to-do list that you're excited about? I want to hear your takeaways from today's training. What do we have on our to-do list? What are we excited to go and double check when we leave here? Yes?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
What would be your recommended AI policy? More specifically, like allowing, say, ChatGPT
Yeah.
to employees. Do you think it's better if you limit it or prohibit it?
So it depends again on your industry, right? If you work in finance, for example, it's prohibited. Or if you work in finance and there's appropriate firewalls where you're on the back end are safe from your information going out into the ether, right? So you can pay for certain versions of AI as an organization like Claude, for example, where everybody in your organization can have a license just the way you would Microsoft 365. And so then that information is contained within your firewalls and it's not going out into just, oh, I ChatGPT'd this. So if your organization is willing to invest in protecting the information from an information security standpoint, then you can allow it through those parameters. But just allowing your employees to copy and paste information into ChatGPT or any of the platforms and it going out into the ether, you run the risk of violating your compliance. You run the risk of violating your HIPAA, right? If you have HIPAA, and all of us handle HIPAA compliant data, and you run the risk of violating any confidentiality agreement you have with any clients. So it's very risky, and it really depends on how you're using it. Yes, ma'am.
Well, our IT department has already implemented an IT policy, pushed it out there.
Good.
And has already put in place safeguards so that people can't go.
Good.
Talk about it. So I would say it's always good to start with your IT department.
Yes.
And say, look, you've got the tools that make us safe.
Yes.
And so that's, I feel very good that for a small company that our IT department.
That's fantastic. Yes, partnering with your IT department is definitely the place to start. Did you have something? No. Any other questions that we want to dive into before I hand it over to Katie to wrap us up? Okay, well, I appreciate your time. You guys have been fantastic.
Thank you, MJ. So as we wrap up, I have one last question to end the workshop. How many of us let me rephrase this. How many of us think we're helpful, that we're helpful people? We're in HR, so we find ourselves helpful, right? Absolutely, perfect. With that in mind, when you open up your folder, I would like you to help us continue to make these workshops even better. Inside the folder, I think on the right-hand side is a survey. If you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to complete that survey, and as you're leaving, you can just leave it right there on the table. That would be wonderful. But again, thank you so much for coming to our workshop today. We do have another workshop that is scheduled for June 3rd, same time, same place, different topic as you're headed out the door. If you're interested in that workshop, we do have a flyer that has the QR code on it so you can register just like you did last time. So thank you so much and have a rest of your Wednesday.